Hi, morning, welcome. Sorry I can't be there. I'd love to have been there having breakfast with you all this morning. I'm sure you've had a great breakfast. I'm sure you've had a great time, good conversations. Yeah, we're in isolation, so I'm sorry that I can't be there and you've got to watch me on a screen. But we're going to answer and look at the question, is the Christian faith a leap in the dark? That's what we're going to think about over the next couple of minutes or so, because that's sometimes how the Christian faith is portrayed, isn't it? That's what many people think. The Christian faith is all about feelings. It's not really about facts, and it involves you sort of hoping for the best and binning your brain. There's a story told of a missionary family with young children in the Middle East. And it was a country where they could be open about their faith in Jesus, so people knew that they were Christians. And one day they were driving along a road when they ran out of petrol. And there was a petrol station not too far away. And so the dad took the only container they had in the car, which was a potty, walked down the road to the petrol station to fill it up, come back and put enough petrol in the car to get to the petrol station. So the dad, with this full potty of petrol, walked back to the car and was just pouring it in to the car when another family pulled up, a family who knew them. And they watched the dad pour the contents of this potty into the car. And when he'd finished, they wound down the window and they said, "Well, we don't share your religion, but we do greatly admire your faith." And that's maybe kind of the situation that some of us find ourselves in. We think, well, I admire the faith of others, but really, it seems as crazy as trying to run a car on the contents of a potty. I was having my hair cut the other day, and I was talking to the lady who's cutting my hair. We got talking about Easter. We often end up talking about Jesus. And she's not a Christian, and she said to me, "Look, we can't really know, can we? None of us know whether it's true. But, I guess as long as it makes you feel better, that's the main thing, isn't it? But none of us know whether or not it's true." And tomorrow is Easter Sunday, when we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And I guess if there is one event in the Christian faith that at first glance may seem like wishful thinking, may seem like, well, we can't really know whether it's true, it is the resurrection of Jesus. We know dead people don't rise. Well, I want to spend the next couple of minutes just exploring, particularly around the resurrection, why the resurrection is based on fact rather than wishful thinking. Why a belief in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead isn't a leap in the dark at all. Hopefully Ian has handed out to you just a little slip of paper with some words from the Bible on. They're taken from Paul's letter to the Corinthian church, and they were written about 20 years after the first Easter Sunday. Let me read them to you. Paul says, "For what I received I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas," that's Peter, "and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, and then to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born." Okay, so here's the claim that Paul makes. Jesus really died, he was really buried, and he really rose again on Easter Sunday, being seen by many people. 3 bits of evidence to point to the fact that Jesus really rose. That belief in Jesus rising from the dead isn't a leap in the dark. First bit of evidence: Jesus' body really disappeared. Jesus' body really disappeared. The tomb on that first Easter morning was empty. So I'm sure you know the story, and Paul outlined it there. Good Friday, Jesus died and was really dead. Romans, very good at killing people. The Roman centurion at the foot of the cross puts a spear into the side of Jesus, blood and water pour out, showing his heart has been pierced, showing that he's really dead. And then that evening he's buried in a tomb, and we even know the location of the tomb, or rather we know whose tomb it was. It was a man called Joseph of Arimathea. So he's buried in a tomb, he's dead. And then Matthew's account of Jesus' life tells us that the religious leaders who had Jesus killed were worried that his disciples might come and steal the body and claim that he'd risen. And so Pilate, a Roman governor, orders this tomb. A tomb cut in the rock with a big stone in front. He orders it sealed, and he orders a squad of Roman soldiers to guard the tomb. Yet, on Easter Sunday, that tomb is empty. These Roman soldiers have somehow been defeated, the seal has been broken, the stone has been rolled away, and the body has really gone. And the body must have really disappeared, because the quickest way for the religious authorities to have stopped the stories of Jesus spreading, the stories that he'd risen spreading, would be to produce the body. To go, all you guys thinking Jesus has risen, ta-da! Here you go. Here's Jesus' decaying corpse. And the story goes nowhere. Now, they couldn't do that. The body had really gone. Now, of course, the disciples may have come and stolen it. But that would mean the disciples who 48 hours earlier had run for their lives had suddenly summoned up the courage, overcome the guards, by the way, without hurting them or tying them up, broken the seal, rolled the rock away, and then run off with the body before they could be caught. Plausible? Maybe. Possible. We've got two options at this point, haven't we? Either Jesus has really risen, or these cowardly disciples have pulled off the heist of the first century. Okay, well, let's explore the second bit of evidence. The tomb was really empty. Secondly, Jesus was seen by many people. Now, we don't just have one appearance of Jesus, but many appearances of Jesus before many people over a period of 40 days. You could explain it, I guess, as a vision or a hallucination if one person claimed to have seen Jesus, had a dodgy lamb kofta the night before, a bit too much wine, hallucination, blurred vision, thought I saw somebody who looked like Jesus. But look at the witness list that Paul gives in those verses. He was raised on the third day according to the scriptures. He appeared to Cephas, that's Peter, and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to 500 brothers and sisters at the same time. Then he appeared to James, Jesus' half-brother. Then to all the apostles. I think that's a wider group of disciples, maybe. And last of all, he appeared to Paul on the road to Damascus. There's a whole list of people that Jesus appeared to over a period of 40 days. And actually later for Paul. But most striking is when he says, verse 6, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time. 500 people, men and women, saw Jesus and spoke with him at the same time. That would have to be a mass hallucination. That's a lot of magic mushrooms being consumed, and a lot of people all seeing the same thing. Many of those, what does he kind of say? Many of those are still living, though some have died. See what Paul's saying? Paul is writing 20 years after the events. It's 9/11 type period, isn't it? Between us and 9/11. And he's saying to these Corinthians, these guys are still alive. Go and find them. If you don't just take my word for it, you can go and find them. You can go and speak to them. See what happened for yourself. If you don't believe me, there are people that are still alive that you can speak to. That's what he's saying to the people he wrote to in Corinth. Now, if it was all a hoax, you wouldn't say something so stupid. You'd say, well, Jesus appeared to a lot of people, but sadly, or you might even say, Jesus didn't appear to many people. And those that he did appear to, well, they've sadly died. So you can't speak to them, and you've got to take my word for it. Now, Paul isn't stupid. You know that from reading the rest of what he writes in the Bible. He's not a stupid man. And he doesn't say that. He says, There are people still alive that you could go and speak to who saw Jesus. Don't take my word for it, is what Paul's saying. So, Jesus' body's really gone. Then there's a second bit of evidence. He's seen by many people over 40 days. Witnesses that were alive when Paul wrote and could be interviewed. Third piece of evidence, Jesus' transformed followers. Now, the people that Paul lists there, they don't get a good report in the accounts of Jesus' life. Jesus' disciples largely are clueless and cowards. Now, clueless cowards, that would be a fair summary of what they're like up until Easter Sunday. They abandon Jesus, they don't get it, they're not expecting him to rise from the dead. Yet these same clueless cowards do a complete 180, and all of them face torture and death and religious persecution for their claim that Jesus really rose from the dead. Something, someone, or some event transformed these men and women into people who would not back down in the face of the might of the Roman Empire and religious persecution. Men and women who would die horrible deaths for the claim that Jesus really rose. Would they die for a lie? Now, you might say, look, lots of people die for lies all the time, and that's true. So I mentioned 9/11. The terrorists on 9/11, they martyred themselves for a lie, the belief that they were doing Allah's work and that they'd be rewarded with many virgins in paradise. That was a lie, which they thought was true. But that's different to these first followers of Jesus. Because these first followers of Jesus would have had to face torture, being fed to wild animals, crucified, knowing all the while that Jesus hadn't really risen. They'd have had to face all that knowing that it was all a lie. Terrorists, people who kind of blow themselves up, martyrs, die for what they think is true. These guys would have had to have died knowing something wasn't true. And of course, the way to stop being tortured and killed would be simply just go, actually, guys, just hold up, keep the lions chained. It was all a hoax. I made it all up. Some of you will know the Watergate scandal in America in 1971. Some of you may not know that. Basically, the Republicans, they tried to fake a burglary to steal papers that put the Democrat Party in a bad light. And a man called Chuck Colson was at the heart of it. And he went to prison for it. And a couple of years later, he became a Christian. And he says this on the resurrection. I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me. How? Because 12 men testified they had seen Jesus raised from the dead, and then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Everyone was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would not have endured that if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep alive for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep alive for 40 years? Absolutely impossible. So, 3 pieces of evidence. Jesus' body was gone. Jesus was seen alive by many different people over a period of 40 days. And Jesus' followers were transformed. And they died for believing that Jesus rose from the dead. Put it another way, we've got to ask the question, haven't we? If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, well, where was the body? How do we answer that? If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, well, how do we explain all those people who claim to have seen him at many different points, many different people, over 40 days? And if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, how do we explain the transformed first followers who would knowingly die for a lie and never uttered the truth to anyone? For me, and for many, and clearly for Paul, there is clear evidence for the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. The Christian faith is not a leap in the dark. It's founded on facts. It's founded on evidence. And actually, I think to reject the Christian faith, I think that's the real leap in the dark. I'm not saying we've got all the answers, but when you look at the resurrection, when you look at the evidence for the resurrection, I think it takes more faith to believe that Jesus didn't rise than he did. And let me just finish with this. If Jesus really did rise, it means that all he said and all he claimed is true. It means that Jesus really is someone we can base our life upon. You and I really can find hope in the face of our own deaths. That's the promise of Easter. You and I really can find freedom from guilt and forgiveness from God. You and I really can find peace and purpose in this life. You and I really can be saved from an eternity in hell and enjoy an eternity in heaven with the risen Jesus. And simply by asking the risen Jesus, the one who is alive in heaven now, please help, please forgive me, please give me life with you now and forever. Please help me to change. You see, if Jesus really did rise, it means that each one of us will really meet him one day. Either we'll meet him as our judge, the one we've ignored and rejected, or we'll meet him as our saviour, who has forgiven us and will welcome us into eternity with him. Is faith a leap in the dark? No, not when you look at the evidence for the resurrection. And so the question we're all left with, and the question that you're left with today, is if Jesus really did rise, then what will we do about it? I'd love to have been there to maybe kind of chat and to answer some questions and to chat a bit more now. If you've got questions, I'm sure there are folk there who happy to chat, I'd be equally happy to chat as well at some point. Many of you got my number, or Ian can give it to you. But thank you so much for coming today. I'm sorry I can't be there. I hope you enjoy the rest of the morning. Thanks very much.